Well, it looks like it's 12 o'clock, everybody, so we might make an official start. Thank you, firstly, to everybody for logging on, and welcome to the webinar, Recreating Koala Habitat, a Practical Guide. Before we get started, I'll do some introductions. To my left, I have Peter Metcalf. He's a master tree grower and a field naturalist. To my right, I have John Lemon, an environmental consultant and a vast history in koala research. I have Struan, a member of our koala team at Southern New England Landcare. And as most of you know, I'm Des Andersen, also from Southern New England Landcare. Before we go on, I'll hand over to Struan to do an acknowledgement of country. And I'll also point out to people that we are recording. We will make this video available after the presentation, but please inform us if you do not wish to be recorded as part of the webinar. Okay, I'll hand over to Struan.
Southern New England Landcare acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered today. We pay our respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to other First Nations people. We celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures, languages, and connection to land and water throughout Australia. So today, everyone, we'd like you to keep two questions in your mind. There are barriers and benefits questions. And if, as the answers occur to you, I'd encourage you to type them into the chat. If I just let everyone know, if you want to find the chat, if you hover below the screen, at the bottom of the screen, there's a little sort of dialogue bubble with chat underneath it. If you click on that, it'll open up a menu on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can choose who you speak to. Down the bottom, you'll see it says to, and then it shows you who the message is going to. So at the moment, I'm choosing everyone because anything I write in there, I want you all to know about it. And I've already typed these questions in. So the questions are, what would stop you from doing a koala habitat planting? And the second question is, what do you see as a benefit from doing a koala habitat planting? So if you're happy as you think of what might be the barriers to you doing this sort of work or not, or the benefits, just to share that with us, that would be great. Thank you very much. And I'll now hand over to Des. I'm going to share my screen. Des has got a PowerPoint to do his presentation.
Thanks, Struan. I'd just like to outline a brief history of the project from year one until now, bearing in mind that we've just celebrated our first year anniversary back on October 13. In this time, we've worked hard to establish links with key partners and the community, and I'll discuss this through the PowerPoint presentation. So I think we have slide one on screen. The Northern Tablelands Koala Partnership Project is funded by the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. Southern New England Landcare is hosting the Koala Partnership team on the Northern Tablelands. The project is by name a partnership, and we emphasise the involvement of the community across many different activities to help protect our local koala population. On slide two, you'll see that the project falls under the New South Wales Koala Strategy, which was released in 2018 by Minister Keane in response to a scientific determination that showed that koalas are facing imminent danger of extinction, unless human behaviour and activities change. Through the New South Wales Koala Strategy, funding was provided to regional koala conservation groups in the following regions: the Winji-Caribbee region on the Southern Highlands, the Port Macquarie-Hastings region, the Kempsey and Coffs Harbour regions, the Lismore-Tweed region, and the Northern Tablelands. The good news is that a further funding release announced in 2021 should add more regions. The overarching aim of the New South Wales Koala Strategy Sorry, no, back on slide 2.
Oh, sorry.
Back the slide.
My view isn't good.
Yeah, go back a few slides.
I'm just gonna...
Is to protect koalas for 100 years. Next slide, sorry.
That's okay.
That's where we are. Underneath this strategy, there are 4 pillars of the project, which include koala habitat conservation on public and private lands, including new reserves. You're on slide 2. Go back. Back to slide 2. That one, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Conservation through community action. In other words, engaging the community to be involved in koala conservation. The safety and health of koalas, which involves investing in resources and koala care networks. And the 4th one being building on our knowledge, monitoring and research programs to build a koala habitat information base. Slide 3. So why is the project needed? The Northern Tablelands is estimated to contain 5 to 10% of the New South Wales koala population. Recent research indicates that koala populations have been moving into climate refuge areas, such as the Northern Tablelands, as a response to an increase in the occurrence, duration, and intensity of heat waves. The current status of koalas in New South Wales is vulnerable. The status is due to be reviewed by a scientific committee and may increase to endangered. Of note, the 2 remaining levels on this scale are critically endangered and then inked in the wild. The direct threats to koalas include habitat loss and habitat degradation, particularly where development pressure in coastal regions has significantly reduced habitat for urban expansion. Land clearing for agriculture is the most significant driver of habitat loss on the slopes and tablelands regions. Koala disease will impact differently according to locations. However, chlamydia is a dominant threat to many koala populations throughout New South Wales. Vehicles, dogs, livestock, and the invasion of weeds and pest animals into koala habitat are all localised threats in many areas. And above all this, we have climate change and natural disasters, which are insidious threats overarching all the before mentioned impacts on koala populations. So slide 4, just a short one, just shows if you needed 3 good reasons to want to help protect our koalas. Firstly, they're our national emblem and identity, and we could lose that. Remembering back to the Sydney Olympics where the koala played such an iconic feature in the games and reflecting on us as Australians. To the second point, where it does reflect on Australians and our desire and responsibility to care for our unique environment. And thirdly, and very sadly, koalas may be confined to zoos for the next generation to see unless steps are taken in the next generation. To slide 5. Some of the pictures indicating the impact of the 2019-2020 drought, where heatwave and bushfires are estimated to have caused a 24% loss of koala habitat and reduced the koala population by 1/3. Slide 6, follow on. What we have on slide 6 is an indicative map showing the extent of the 2019 bushfires, the blue line indicating Armidale's local government area. The loss of large areas of protected koala habitat in the National Park Estate and their connections to vegetation corridors across the Northern Tablelands means that unless these areas recover, koalas can no longer use habitat or move between eastern areas and the tablelands. Hence, they're cutting off the potential to move to climate refuge areas. One of the primary purposes of the project is to work with council and community members to ensure that these corridors are both conserved and improved by enhancing public and private lands and thus creating koala habitat corridors. Moving to slide 7, which brings us to the question, through the project, what can we do? In 2020, the Northern Tablelands Koala Partnership Project has initiated working partnerships with council and community groups, community carers, research organisations, community members, and private landholders. And on slide 8, bringing me to your interest in the project and what can we do to restore native vegetation on our properties. Firstly, installing or recreating koala-friendly habitat. There are around 100 species of local native shrubs and trees that are used by koalas for food and shelter in our area. So there's a focus on not only feed trees, but also habitat trees, being shrubs and trees that may not be eucalypts. Secondly, we want to recreate some of the natural landscapes we have in our area, such as recreating our natural box gum grassy woodlands, meaning that trees are spaced a little further apart than a typical windbreak. Canopy trees being spaced 7 to 10 metres apart and shrubs 3 to 4 metres apart. This ensures that canopies interlock and koalas can move through the canopy without having to take refuge and move on the ground layer. And shrubs are there to provide protection on the ground through protection from predators, and also shrub layers serve as a climate control for koalas to avoid the heat. By constructing and recreating our natural landscapes, we can also favour agriculture through the provision of native grasses such as microlina that are favourable for livestock grazing. The koala vegetation guidelines released by DPI in New South Wales give a good outline. For the best results, there's a website there that we'll make available to people. And lastly, this brings me to the EOI process, or your expression of interest, and how to get involved. If you'd like to follow us up following this webinar, you can email Southern New England Landcare for an expression of interest. Once this is received, we'll organise a time to meet on your property and develop a koala habitat plan. When we have a plan, this can move to a landholder management agreement, which is drafted to outline the project and the funding details to support the project. Funding for on-ground koala habitat will be open until 2025. We currently have many EOIs, I think in the vicinity of 30 or 40, which we'll follow up shortly. Always happy to take new ones. It doesn't have to be focused on habitat. We can accept EOIs right through the range of various koala conservation activities, which we'll outline further. We'd also like to know if there's an opportunity for joint enterprise planning, where neighbours together plan koala habitat to create connected vegetation corridors. And lastly, through the project, we've created knowledge packs, which will be available from Southern New England Landcare soon. These will be accompanied by koala habitat packs, or 40 HICO packs to ensure that you can get started on your koala project. In order to receive one of these, we'd like you to indicate via the evaluation form, which you should have already received. Also, and lastly, please stay in touch with Southern New England Landcare for more information. Which brings me to a close. I'll hand over to John.
Okay, thanks, Des. As Des said, I'm John Lemon. I've been involved in environmental research for 30 odd years. I first started with CSIRO wildlife research, doing 6 years of research on dingoes. And then I went farming for 15 years. And then after that, when interest rates hit 25%, I ended up getting a job as a research centre manager. at the Soil Conservation Service Research Centre at Gunnedah. That was in 1988. And yeah, so over the 25 years that I was there, that morphed into various research projects. Koalas were present in the Gunnedah Basin, in the mid-80s, sort of, but then their populations started to increase, and that was also true on the research centres. So until Dan Lunny, myself, and another team undertook a research project in 2008 to 2011, not a lot was known about the koalas in that part of the world. So, and that was to gain a better understanding of sort of their part in the landscape. Now that I'm living in Armidale, I've been really fortunate to collaborate on a number of research projects in the Northern Tablelands, which has been a real plus. Anyway, I'd like to briefly explain that koalas in different parts of the Tablelands seem to favour different tree species, and this is from research that we undertook a few years back. In the immediate Armidale area, Blakely's red gum, silver-top stringybark, New England stringybark, and applebox seem to be the favoured species. There are many more species that are used, but these seem to be the preferred ones. They also like Angopteris around this part of the world too, rough-barked apple. In the Noundock area, we found that snow gum and Sydney blue gum to a lesser extent, but definitely wattle-leaf peppermint seem to be preferred. So we can't really explain why, but that's a bit of a work in progress. When we're undertaking the surveys at Noundock, we found that some of the wattle-leaf peppermints were browsed to death, which was similar to what we found in Gunnedah, particularly on the research centre. There were river red gums; they just love them. They're like ice cream. So that's their favourite plant, along with Bimblebox in that part of the world. So that kicked off my interest in establishing habitat for koalas, and then that sort of morphed into what I called habitat reconstruction, which was a whole of landscape approach to incorporate koala trees into those plantings. So other species such as yellow box are used across all landscapes pretty much. Now, the interesting thing also that we found in this part of the world was ribbon gum, Eucalyptus spinalis, which has been recommended as a preferred koala tree for a long time by different agencies. It just wasn't used much at all, which was a bit of a surprise. Whenever you're doing any plantings, it's also important to incorporate shade species such as casuarinas, allocasuarinas, and I'd even consider courageons, because they're used down on the slopes and plains, but they also seem to be moving from west to east, a bit like koalas, I think. Now, I'd also like to elaborate on the value of a diverse planting to accommodate other native fauna species as well as koalas. They need to cohabit in the same space to achieve a balanced ecosystem. So after establishing approximately 35 hectares on the research centre of adjoining planting sites that ran from 1991 to 2017 was my last planting there of 6 hectares. We've been able to scientifically document the increased value of all aspects of habitat reconstruction. So from soil organic carbon and soil health and soil biota, native vegetation, native fauna, and by undertaking small mammal trapping, as well as incorporating bird observations as a biodiversity indicator, we've monitored, documented all of these interconnected aspects of habitat reconstruction. So that I work with Professor Brian Wilson, I've worked with Steve Devers, Warren Martin, hoping to wrap up the small mammal project down the track. But so it showed us that by undertaking this, species richness and abundance increased over time, and that's an extremely positive outcome. So just let me know if you're interested in any of these, these research publications, and we can get them to you. It's also important to emphasise the value of retaining existing habitat, and I guess you guys wouldn't be here if you weren't interested in that. And also, due to recent rainfall, the opportunity to fence off adjoining areas, for natural regeneration is a real possibility. So, why not let Mother Nature do the heavy lifting? If it's fenced off, then it can regenerate and also add to what habitats you have. Most tree species can take up to 80 years for a tree hollow to develop. Even dead paddock trees have a real value by providing habitat for native fauna. Again, most of you would know that. It's really important to retain as much existing habitat as possible. So trees flattened by the recent tornado, for example, they can create habitat, but obviously not koala habitat. Fencing off areas that are starting to regenerate, I've said that before, next to existing koala habitat, that's a great way to get started. Now, just like to make the point that windbreaks of 3, 4 and 5 rows really aren't suitable for koala habitat. They might be used, but it's really not a long-term usage. So research has shown that the preferred width of habitat plantings is approximately 100 metres. This allows for a balanced ecosystem, which includes small bird species. Small bird species are very vulnerable to not so wide plantings. So look, it's part of a whole landscape approach, and stock exclusion, with all plantings is essential. Again, most of us know what damage stock can do if they get into a paddock, the freshly planted trees and shrubs. So look, when establishing koala habitat, planning, preparation, implementation and maintenance of plantings are crucial to a successful outcome. When I work for government agencies and for myself, I've actually compiled a simple guide to establishing native planting on farms. It's a bit like Kerry Packer said, if it's not on a sheet of A4, I don't want to see it. So I'm happy to leave that with Snell if anyone's interested. Anyway, in conclusion, only undertake what can be successfully achieved in a staged and structured manner. Too many people make the mistake of being too ambitious initially. It's best to start with the little steps when commencing any habitat planting projects. And in conclusion, I'd just like to thank Snell for giving me the opportunity to share my gained experience with you. And I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Years of seed. At the moment, there's plenty of trees knocked over by the cyclone, but when you have a look at them, there's virtually no seed. There's lots of bud, maybe flower, but where you'd expect last year's crop of seed, there's nothing. And the previous year's crop is missing as well. So just at this time of high demand, nature has conspired against us. The time it takes between growing a seedling and getting it to a plantable age, the little hycos are the best thing to plant. That's about a year. And letting the people know, putting in an expression of interest with Snell and an expression of interest or a request to Armadale Tree Group or Kentucky Nursery or any other local nursery that grows natives. If they've got the seed, they've got a chance to grow it.
Seed banks.
Also the other thing is now it's too late for spring planting, because by the time you prepare and let the soil settle back down again in the rip lines, it'll be a bit late, getting a bit too hot. So you're up for an autumn planting, or maybe a next year's spring planting would be the way to look.
Can I just jump in?
Yes.
Yeah, so what Peter's saying is dead on the money. Most of my plantings I've always planned 12 months ahead. So ground preparation, spraying out the weeds, but the most important thing is allowing soil moisture to build up so that you've got a full soil profile. If you don't have any weeds that are sucking that moisture out, and you know where you want to establish your trees and shrubs, it sort of could be a blessing in disguise, because a lot of people very keen to get started, plant and then have to water and water and water. Whereas if you plant 12 months out, great opportunity. That's how I see it. Rather, it's unfortunate for those who've actually got their sites ready, but still, I'd see it as an opportunity rather than a disadvantage, except for the lack of tree seed over the drought.
Actually, that's an interesting thought. If you've got any trees that are down, have a look at them and see whether there's any mature capsules on them. And I just cut above and below and get most of the leaves off and put it in a bucket, and that'll give quite a lot of seed. And the tree group would be very happy to come out and collect seed from your place if you've got seed of just about anything. I fluked a tree on Buralong Road that had a nice lot of seed on it, and it was Acacia dalrympliana, which is one of the food trees that koalas will use. The other thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of regeneration. I see it as post-drought regeneration. And if you have a look around for that, it might be strategic to put an electric fence around a bit of country that where the seedlings are coming up. Just exclude the stock for long enough so that they can, so the seedlings can get established.
Might be 5 years, but if
yeah,
you've got
but
cattle, it just
depends on whether you're running sheep or cattle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The other thing is, depending on your landscape, where you wish to plant, that will determine the species mix that you use in the planting. And there's a natural sequence that runs from the top of the hill to the water body in New England. And you start off with, if you're lucky, ironbarks on the top in the gravelly ridges, and springy bark, and then coming back down through yellow box and red gum, and down on the deeper soils, the peppermints. Actually, I was thinking the other day, New England peppermint, which is narrow-leaf peppermint, is quite a favoured koala tree. They rather like that. It's pretty rare. How did they get the taste for it? You know, it's there's a lot of unanswered questions. I was starting to write down what I knew. There was more a list of what I don't know that became my page of notes.
Yeah.
So my observation is that there are certain trees within a species that are favoured. Why this particular red gum or that particular yellow box? And the answer is because it tastes right. And what do we know unless you go around chewing gum trees, chewing leaves?
It could be, and this is something we don't know either, Peter, that, and I've seen trees, bimblebox side by side, and the same with the ukes, some of the ukes. One's almost been browsed to death, and the other ones, and whether that tree's got its roots into some minerals or something within the rocks that makes it more palatable. But again, it's something that I've done work on the tissue and stuff like this, but work in progress. Yeah.
Another observation I've made is that some people quite often I'll say, I've got a wonderful looking tree, and when you go and have a look at it, it's actually not a species but a hybrid. And I have a sneaking suspicion that hybrids don't taste right for insects, and so they're not being chewed about by insects, and maybe not chewed about by koalas either. So it's an interesting sort of, what koalas like in the landscape is not how we perceive it.
The interesting thing too around Gunnedah, and I don't know if it applies here, but certain areas around Pine Cliffs, which is sort of between Kaluas and Town Bar Springs, I noticed that there was an Angophora floribunda, rough-barked apple, that was, again, almost browsed, completely over-browsed. And there was a koala in the tree when I found that out. And that, sort of made me wonder. I mean, everyone seems to think koalas just like, eucalypts, but that was a bit of a revelation for me. And so that's one tree species which I definitely include in any planting up here. But it was just, yeah, it was and no one could explain it. Even people who work on the botany and gut flora of koalas are just. So again, that's a work in progress. They've been around for about 20 million years, but there's a hell of a lot we don't know about koalas.
Yeah, there's work being done in this field at the moment through various institutions to see how genetics, how family groups, how gut biota, and particular physical attributes of the landscape like soils and tree species is preferred by koalas in their feed trees. And I think, I mean, it's an area that's very new and very open, but indications seem to be that they are very specific, and it might be it's all to do with the taste of the leaves and the nutrients which come out of the leaves that will set up a preference for that particular koala for life. And there are particular barriers then for that koala to move through the landscape as is provided by the abundance of those particular trees. So it can be a common case where koalas won't move between stringy barks and box scums because they're not adapted to the particular tree species. But as I said, these are very early conclusions and is a big area at the moment for research. I might move on. I'll just let everybody know that we will still run through to a bit past 1 o'clock with a time for question and answer at the end. Apologies about the audio on the video, but we will send it out to everybody, and I think Struan would have looked after that in the meantime. So we'll have that to you, and we would encourage everybody to have a look at it. It takes you through the mechanics of planting by some of the experts that we have that have been there and done that over many years. On that note, I'm just going to introduce everybody to what we have available to help you get started in terms of plant stock and equipment, should you want to start your project with us. Firstly, we have a number of native tree nurseries in the area. Within the Armidale area, we have the Armidale Tree Group, and we have Kentucky Tree Nursery, and we also have a native nursery at Black Mountain, and there are other native tree nurseries around the New England Tablelands. But the ones that I mentioned firstly are specifically charged with providing native trees that are indigenous to our particular area. They do generate many, many trees each year, but they're also restricted in terms of supply and demand. So we encourage anybody that's thinking about starting a planting project to get in early. As part of the planning process, as soon as you're ready to start your preparation on ground, it's a good time to give a call to the native nurseries and let them know the particular stock they want, you want. Having said that, when you work with Southern New England Landcare, we'll provide you with a list of trees as recommended by people like the Armidale Tree Group that are specific for koalas and also will do well in your particular area, whether it be on top of a ridge or a valley. We'll make sure that the trees are set up and aligned with the particular environment to do the best within that environment. And thereby maximise your success. To help you get started, if you're in a position to do many hundreds of trees or perhaps into the thousands, it's often the case where you might need help from resources from native nurseries. And there are things to help you get that planting underway and prepared in enough detail to make the planting process run smoothly. Also a very good idea, and this is common to some areas and people where they do community plantings, to get together with your neighbours and to organise a barbecue or something in the afternoon and a morning of tree planting with 4 or 5 neighbours obviously reduces the amount of effort by 4 or 5 times if you can do that. There are other equipment there is other equipment specific to tree planting, such as spray tanks, direct seeders and mounders. If they are specific to your project, they are available for hire from the Armidale Tree Group. Lastly, if you're thinking about expanding a project, let us know so we can have a look at that, because the main aim of the project from the overall point of view is to gather plantings within an area to create those corridors that we were talking about before. So getting east-west links over the tablelands and filling in some of the gaps that we have in our landscape as a result of clearing from past practices. Yeah, I'm happy to hand over. That's me.
Oh, no. I was just going to say there's the other thing, and sort of the bushfires that we've recently experienced. The other thing that often drops out of this is loss of trees due to the drought. Now, we had a koala with a GPS tracking collar on at Sunnyside, and I would say that around 50% of the stringy barks, which form part of that koala's habitat, they're just gone. They're dead. And I came across an Angothra out of Arding, which would have been about 300 years old, and it's dead. So the thing is, I mean, apart from the bushfires and apart from historic clearing and the drought, the habitat for not only koalas but other native species has declined really significantly recently. So look, any little bit that each and every one of us can do, it'll make a difference. It'll help. Yeah. So sorry for jumping in.
Absolutely. No, it's open time now for questions or comments.
Well, I'd make a comment there too, because I've looked at quite a lot of established grazing country, and what's missing is about 100 years of seedlings. You've got very old, well, geriatric forests, and there's nothing, and they're doomed. They're going to die, these old trees. And just every little seedling that comes up is very edible, and they're missing from the landscape. And it's nice to go into a forest where you've got trees that are in that 20 to 50 year age group, and you know that they're going to take over from the older trees as they die. So the missing understory is quite important, especially when it comes to birds and other things like that.
Yeah, that's an important point, and I've seen on the positive side of Peter's comment, I've seen some great results from stock exclusion that can happen in as little as 2 to 3 years. It's normally a little bit longer than that. It might take 5 or up to 10 years. But excluding stock and the impact that the browsing has on those trees regenerating is significant, and it may only take you 2 or 3 years to fence off a conservation area. If the tree is flowering and thus goes to seed, then generally within 2 or 3 seasons you start to get your regeneration. And we can work with people that might have that situation by developing what we call conservation areas or enrichment plantings, where we give the landscape a little bit of a hand by establishing a few trees on a sparse mosaic type plan and giving that environment the opportunity to regenerate. Again, look, I'll make the point that livestock exclusion is the best idea. I know people have the idea where they like to graze livestock for fire control and weed management. It can be done in very short bursts, but generally livestock do take away that regeneration potential of the habitat.
It's sort of crash grazing. That's what I used to use. Sort of not just the sites of Gunnedah, but Wagga Wagga, Emerald Hill, different areas, and that was a condition with the landholders. Crash grazing. There's one other. When I say crash grazing, just strategic stocking in a very short period of time. One other, and it just sort of came to me, one other plant that I've incorporated in almost every planting since the mid-2000s is Blackhorn, Basaria Spinosa. that is really loved by little birds. It gives them protection and it grows reasonably quickly. A lot of people see it up here as a bit of a problem plant, but really it's an asset within a landscape planting. So there's another one to think about too.
Oh, well, sixth the single Basaria,
Yeah.
heavens above. It's very important in that it controls pasture beetles by providing nectar to the wingless wasps that parasitise pasture beetles. So the males, which are big and strong, and big wings, they pick up the wingless female and take her to the Basaria for an outing, shall we say, and then take her back to where the beetle larvae are. So that plays a vital part in the total control program of pasture beetles.
And pollination.
Yeah, pollination too. I don't know about the big wasps, the male wasps are active pollinators in quite a few plants. So that's right.
Thanks for the comments. Given that it's 12:45, I might open to the audience in general for question and answer.
I've got a couple.
Struan might start off with a couple that have come up, and I might hand them over to the best person to answer the question.
So Jodie's asked, Des, is the project restricted to the Armidale LGA?
Good question, Jodie. The project scope at this stage is restricted to roughly a 40-kilometre radius of Armidale. So that's Guyra in the north to south of Uralla, towards Kentucky, to Wallamombi in the east, over towards Kingstown, Yarrawick in the west. However, with additional funding that we're expecting to bring on board in the coming years, we'd really like to get throughout the Southern New England area, which pretty much encompasses every locality from Bendemeer and Nowandock through to Ben Lomond and out towards Tinga. So if you're interested, we will try and capture your EOI in the project. It may not be priority one at the moment, but there are at least 5 years to come out and see you. And we're also happy to pass on projects to some of our partners like Land Services that may have a similar project that may facilitate what you're after.
Just to let everyone know, we've got questions coming into the chat, which I will go through. But if you did want to speak a question, you can raise your hand. There's a reaction button down the bottom where you can raise your hand, and then I'll call on you to ask a question if you prefer to do it that way. So, Des, we've got a question from Simon Beavers, who's unfortunately unable to be here today.
Yep.
He says, I'd be very interested to hear about what we can do to make crossing existing 5-wire and 2-barb fence easier. If indeed this type isn't too problematic. Most of our farm near Guyra, Tinga, has this fencing. Yeah,
that's a great point to bring up again, because that question's covering a key threat to koalas, which is the fact that they can't move through a landscape that's got some impenetrable human structures, whether it's steel fencing in urban areas or mesh fencing on farms. A very simple method, as I think most people understand, to overcome that is to provide ropes that are thick enough for koalas to climb up. So perhaps you're looking around about the circumference of your wrist, a little smaller than that. If you can provide strategic crossing places for koalas, particularly if they're adjacent to vegetated sites, then you've provided a lot of help to the particular koala to cross what could be otherwise an impenetrable barrier.
Can I just jump in there?
Yep.
So koalas, I tracked a little female to the north of Armidale, and she did cross hinge joint, barb on top. I mean, I ripped a pair of strides trying to track her down. So not only that, in Gunnedah, koalas climbed a colour bomb fence. Don't ask me how. They can, they can climb all sorts of all manner of things. One was on electricity pole right in the middle of the Wandabar Plain. But another thought apart from the rope is perhaps old carpet. You just cut a strip that, you know, say a foot wide and hang it over. That's another, you know, another probably cost-effective and easy way to do it if you think that's, you know, necessary.
Yeah, thanks, John.
What about logs or tree trunks? Could you do something like that?
Yeah, you certainly could. But I mean, I tend to think that they can, unless it's a solid impenetrable barrier, somehow they find their way around it in most cases, which is a bit of a surprise, but that's just what I found from the field work.
Yeah, that's good news. Yeah. Next question.
So Katie says, we only have 20 acres. Do you have a minimum land size to be involved in the project? In a word, no. Anybody's welcome. We have worked with as small as 5 acre blocks. We're obviously a little bit strategic about the way we prioritize lands, in that we want to try and put these projects into the priority areas around what's known as the Armidale Arc, or area of regional koala significance. However, anybody's welcome, and we'll try and help where we can. Sally and Bill have asked, is it beneficial to plant koala habitat in areas that have no koalas currently, or better to plant out habitat for other species?
Just do both. Yeah, you know, that's yes, that's the easiest way to address it. Yeah. We don't know. Koalas are moving. I'm working on a project with the Australian Museum doing DNA testing. So we have a reserve of koala DNA results, from the plains and the slopes, but we don't have much in the way of. We've got about 50 samples, so we're trying to see if the koalas are moving from west to east, which I strongly suspect they are. So where there mightn't be any koala habitat or any koalas at the moment, there quite well could be over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years as they head towards the cooler climates like my wife and I did. Sorry, Peter, I jumped in.
I was going to say the mixed planting generally will include koala food species anyway, so that you've got wattles and things like bottlebrush and tea tree, and then the eucalypt species is your crown layer. So you're in planting anything that's got a mixture like that, you're going to be looking after a wide spectrum of species, right from the ground flora right through to the koalas eventually. Yeah. And I think just to finalise that point, by planting koala habitat, we're also giving a lot of other critters in the landscape a helping hand as well. So the project has a lot of benefits, not only to koalas, but if you don't believe you're in the koala zone, the information shows that they've used just about all the habitat around Armidale. It's going to help a number of creatures and general biodiversity anyway. So it has a lot of multiple benefits there. Question? Has anyone else got any questions? Because we've run out.
Hello, I'll ask another question. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Hi, it's Katie here. I just have another question about any possible interactions or, observations you guys have around properties with lots of pest species like rabbits and foxes, and any impact that might have on koalas or potential koala populations.
If you'd like to
go. Katie, wild dogs are probably, there are two major threats to koalas, I'd say, in this area. Wild dogs would be one, foxes to a lesser extent, but also cattle. Cattle, I mean, I've got photographs of a koala that was trampled by some cattle on the Namoi River. It's a mobbing response. It's inbuilt in the cattle, in their brain. They just sort of mob a koala and then trample it. So, and that's happened on a number of occasions. So they're probably the two, the two key ones for this part of the world. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you see a koala moving between trees or whatever, they're very cautious. So they'll walk across and jump onto the base of a tree and have a look around. And then if there's nothing threatening for them, they'll hop down and go to the next tree. And that's how they proceed across the landscape. Yeah, so any tree or any telegraph pole is a lookout point between where you're going to. Yeah.
A decision-making process.
Yeah. Potential refuge.
And I hope that helps, Katie.
It does. Katie, I'll just make a final point on that too. Generally, weeds and pest species in the landscape are not helpful for koalas or your biodiversity. It's going to impact on your regeneration of species, so your diversity of species is impacted on that front as well. Weeds in general can provide a barrier. If it's something like blackberry, that's known to be a barrier to movement. As John was saying, if a koala is trying to get from point A to point B quickly, he or she probably doesn't want to have to detour around blackberry bushes or rabbit burrows where they're in the open and exposed to predators. So good question. I hope that one was answered for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
No worries.
We have a question from Dominique. Dominique, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, hi guys. Thanks for doing today. Really useful after the recent tornado. Look, my question really, John, you were saying 100 metres wide. We have, in the last few years, planted 2,500 trees, predominantly in lines. But we're looking to regenerate what got torn apart recently. So I guess my question is it better to plant if the corridors will be used, is it then better to plant the corridors moving into pockets of 100 metres wide?
Yeah, I missed the last bit, but the answer would be yes. I mean, you can build on what you've already got. And the benefit of that, what you've already established, if it's against an adjoining fence, then you can sort of move that out so that what happens over time, it's not a loss of production. As Robin Watson and her family down on the Namoy have found, by planting habitat, it has the flow-on effect of creating habitat for birds as well as koalas. Yes. But also, I found the same thing at the research centre. The production actually increased, and then over time. So it was just and there have been cost-benefit analysis of that on different properties. So I'd basically expand, have a look at what you've got, decide what species are missing, the ones that are local and endemic to your area, and build on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, let me go to that.
What's the things that are missing?
No, it's fine. You called enough about the accommodation thing.
Okay. So
Whinge. About your friends at Lachlan.
Sorry, make sure you're on mute, everybody. We've just you're coming through as a personal conversation. We probably shouldn't hear.
One of the things that to know what you're missing from your area, have a look at the road reserves and the TSRs nearby. An observation we've made is on Rockvale Road, for example, the properties adjoining the Rockvale Road have virtually no wattle trees at all. Yet along Rockvale Road road reserve, there are something like 10 species of wattle, just as an indicator that what's missing from where grazing has been undertaken for over 100 years. Yeah. So look at the remnants, and that'll give you an indication.
And I'll just finish that on a general point too. With a lot of narrow linear vegetation corridors, it's what's known as the buffer effect, where if they're too narrow, the edges of that habitat will get a first front line, if you like, in insect attack, and also general weathering and exposed to wind and heat from the sun, the more you plant bigger, wider areas, it has the effect of reducing that edge, and thereby, while the edge of your habitat might still be exposed, you've got a greater area within that habitat that's likely to survive and thrive. So the edge effect and buffers need to be taken into account as well.
Can I just jump in there too? Because so the sequential planting, and that's why planning and preparation is important. But what I did on the research centre and on other farmers' properties when I was in Gunnedah was that you'd look at the least productive part of your paddock to a certain extent, or what suited your farm plan, and then you would, over a period of time, you might do a hectare one year, and then you do a hectare the following year. So you add sequential plantings, and by doing that, we sort of recreated 35 hectares of habitat. And to give you this was my eureka moment. I started doing that in 1991, and in 2010, I found that common dunnuts had recolonised the plantings that I'd established, and one of those plantings was in 2001. So the 1998 and the 2001 planting, 2010, common dunnuts had actually come down from porcupine, the porcupine range, and recolonised those areas, along with speckled warblers and painted honeyeaters and glossy black cockatoos. And that to me was everything I've done in my entire life, apart from getting married and having a couple of great daughters. That was my eureka moment. It was just fantastic. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. There's time for probably one or two more questions, but just short of 1 o'clock. Is anybody else?
I wanted to know what the name of that wasp was.
Well, actually,
it's a parasitic wasp.
Yes, it is. I don't know the technical name of it, but it's a great big gunmetal blue wasp. It's probably a couple of joints of your little finger.
Yeah, it's
a big wasp.
Big wasp. You would have seen it. Most people have. Yeah.
The interesting thing is they fly across the wind, trying to smell the females as they emerge and climb up the grass stems. And it's quite interesting. They're great big blue wasps. Yeah, they're quite impressive.
I have heard the name, but I just have to check with the person.
Yeah. I think we'll get back to you.
Look, my understanding is that taxonomy, as long as their mates know.
Any final questions from the audience?
Katie, you've got your hand up. Did you have another question you want to ask?
I do, if that's okay, just a quick one. On our property, so again, 20 acres, we have a very large amount of dead trees, I'm guessing from the drought. Some of them are coming back, but when we're limited on space, and I do acknowledge the importance of having, those dead trees for hollows and things, but what's the recommendation there, or what's the view? Leave those trees and plant more, or is it better to do some reduction of those dead trees to make space for new ones?
No, leave them. Is anybody?
It's the canopy. Yeah. It's the canopy that's the limiting factor. And if you've got dead trees, there's no canopy, so the light's getting through to the ground layer, and that's good for your grasses, shrubs, and the tree seedlings that you put in. So don't worry about the dead ones.
No, they're vital. They play a vital role in the landscape, Katie. And unfortunately, we have this cultural mechanism that's to tidy it up, and that goes for fallen timber on the ground as well as standing dead trees. People have the urge to tidy it up, but if you look at it in a different way through the perspective of what it provides for nesting birds, for animals that want to look out, for bats, there are thousands of species of bats around that use it. We need more of those, and they're also, if you like, endangered themselves in not providing habitat for animals that rely on them. So if you can, try and look at it that way. And I suggest that they can be quite, magnificent in the landscape by themselves. If you've seen photos of a dead tree superimposed on a sunset or something, they can be nice. So
it's the artistic.
That's great. Thank you.
No problem.
They make great perches for birds of prey too. So.
Yeah. Great perches for birds of prey.
And I'll clean up the rabbits, hopefully.
That's
We actually had one try and take our dogs, so that was quite fun.
That's a bit of
Sounds like a wedge-tail eagle.
Wedge tail, yep.
How much you like the dog? Maybe the trick does have to go. Maybe you're right.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Final comments I'll call. We're a bit over 1 o'clock now, and then I'll conclude. So, Kevin, do we have any general comments?
No. Do we have any upcoming events that we want to mention? Not at this stage. We're still planning, aren't we? In a way. So.
Okay.
Actually, there's a tree planting. Untitled tree groups undertaking that next Saturday week.
Okay, can you plug that one to the audience?
Oh God, where is it?
Untitled Tree Group has a tree planting coming up.
Enmore, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, on Saturday at I think it's 2 o'clock. You can go to the Untitled Tree Group webpage, but they're putting in 1,000 trees. The site's already been prepared, and there'll be signage, directions sort of out towards Enmore. I'm responsible for doing those. So, but yeah, just it's a good opportunity to see, sort of staged habitat plantings in action. Yeah.
No, chance to practice your planting skills.
Well, I wasn't going to put that out there.
It's the demonstration plantings are great to attend, and we'll try and get one of those operating this year. This event was originally designed to be a demonstration planting. However, COVID kind of put paid to that. But if there is any more that come up in the meantime, particularly the Untitled Tree Group are in a good place to go and demonstrate what, how, where, what species to use. And you can find those through Untitled Tree Group, also the Southern New England Landcare website. We'll publicise those on our e-news service. If you haven't got e-news, please let us know, and we'll provide you with that so you're up to date with all the events.
Yeah,
just one more thing.
Final comment.
I'd like to say thank you very much, everyone, and for bearing with us while we had some technological issues, which is meant to be my job, but sometimes it's beyond my reach. Anyway, look, welcome to contact Southern New England Landcare, Des or I, at any stage if you want more information. And I'd just like to say that this event is part of Southern New England Landcare's Northern Tablelands Koala Partnership Project, funded under the Saving Our Species program for the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. And we'd like to thank them very much for their ongoing support.
I'm happy to leave it open for a few minutes, but we'll bring it to an official close. Again, apologies that the audio didn't work, but we'll provide that to anybody who's interested. So thanks, everybody, and I look forward to talking to you down the track.
All the best. Thank you.
Yes.